The New Orleans Saints roster cuts have been mostly chalk thus far, but there are some surprises potentially in store on Tuesday. We got all that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? I am your host, your friend Ross Jackson, New Orleans native, your New Orleans Saints expert and credentialed member of the media covering those New Orleans Saints as a Saints beat writer over at LouisianaSports.net. And on today's episode of Locked On Saints, Audric Estime could be a pretty interesting pickup for the New Orleans Saints should they decide to go to waivers to add to their running back room. The New Orleans Saints quarterback deliberations, quote unquote, continue as the week goes on. I'll tell you why I think the Saints might already have their minds made up. And we'll kick everything off with a look at the roster cut so far. No big surprises, but certainly some surprises that should be on the way. We appreciate you very much as always. Whether it's your first time or your next time being here with us this time, making us your first listen, and being an every day you're here on the show, which is a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Football season is right around the corner. Visit the FanDuel app today so you can start planning your futures bets now. The New Orleans Saints have already begun to make their roster cuts, and so far all of the cuts are pretty much chalk. Nothing super surprising so far. But some surprises very well could be on the way. Let's focus on those who have been cut so far. The Saints released or waived/released 14 different players on Monday. No big surprises amongst this group. However, there are some contextual takeaways from the list of those released or waived. Just as a quick refresher, released is typically a veteran, 3 years, vested NFL experience, meaning that they go straight to free agency and can choose who they do business with from that point forward. If you're waived, you are subject to waivers, meaning that teams can put a claim in on you, and then you don't get a chance to negotiate where you go. Whoever has the highest waiver priority that put a claim in on you simply gets you, basically, is the way that it all works. Those waiver claims are expected to come up or process rather Wednesday, usually around like 11 a.m. Eastern time, if I remember correctly. So the Saints, look, I'm not going to run through all 14 players that were moved, but there were a couple of guys that kind of stood out or at least had some ripple effects attached to them. Let's start off with a player that is an absolute shoe-in for the practice squad, and that is edge rusher Jasheen Davis coming out of Wake Forest, a guy I was really high on coming in as an undrafted free agent. Unfortunately, had that injury that kept him out for those first two preseason games, got into his third and final preseason game, his only preseason game for him, up against the Denver Broncos, secured a sack. But as we expected, just with the injury and things like that, not enough to be able to make the roster. So I had the Saints releasing him and potentially getting him over to the practice squad. I think that they'll try to do that. If you're concerned about players crossing through waivers, there were like 800 and something players that ended up going through waivers on Sunday because they were released over the course of the weekend. And so that waiver wire period is a little bit different for them. And like 2% of them were picked up off of waivers. So I'm not, again, this is something we go through every single year where everyone's always so worried, oh, you can't send that players to waiver. There's no way that they'll make it through waivers, blah, blah, and then they always do. Teams are always way more concerned about bringing their talent back to their practice squad that they spent time with over the course of the offseason than they are with trying to acquire new talent. Although the New Orleans Saints are likely to be in need of new talent. They had 2 offensive tackles that they let go, as well as 2 guards that they let go. And they have an injury with Landon Young, who is one of those swing tackles. Outside of Barry Wesley at this point, and maybe a little bit of Dylan Radins, there's not really any reliable tackle depth for this team right now because Landon Young is dealing with an injury that's going to keep him out for some time, as Kellen Moore said on Monday. So seeing all these releases on the offensive line was a little bit surprising because that's not really a position where the Saints, A, have a lot of top end depth in the first place, and then B, have a lot of healthy depth to turn to. So it'll be interesting to see if they go to the market when it comes to tackle. So a little bit of ripple effect stuff there. No surprise to see both of the undrafted free agent wide receivers, Roderick Daniels, as well as Moochie Dixon. Daniels was added a little bit later after the team had already moved on from Chris Tyree, who was originally signed along with Moochie Dixon as a UDFA after the draft. No big surprise to see those two guys out Another ripple effect guy was James Burnip, the punter. James Burnip being released, or waived rather, and with him being waived, that opens up the door for Kai Kroger to become the next punter in New Orleans, the fourth punter in as many years. But that's only assuming that the Saints don't go out and try to find another punter as well. Kellen Moore, a little bit lukewarm on trying to commit to Kai Kroger as their starter. He's there, and James Burnip isn't, so that means Kai Kroger is in position. But should the Saints find another punter that they're interested in, I wouldn't be surprised if they ended up turning to that route. So those are a few of the players that were released. You can find the entire list over at louisianasports.net, but nothing super surprising when it came to it. Again, most of the releases on Monday were all chalk, 14 releases / waves. The only release really, I keep using that word because it's kind of the standard word, but really there's a designation between release and wave that we covered earlier. So I apologize for continuing to screw that up. But when it comes to a release, the only one was Cam Akers. And I've seen some people surprised by that. I've seen other people not surprised by that. I am not surprised by that. Cam Akers never really looked like he really had his legs under him throughout this preseason and throughout training camp. I thought maybe the fact that he's a solid pass protector might help him out, but his inability to really get going in the run game here in New Orleans certainly didn't really help him out a ton. Now, get him on the practice squad and then see how he, improves throughout and fits in your system, kind of learns the role a little bit more, all those other pieces, then maybe that ends up kind of helping to elevate him a little bit. But for right now, not super surprising to see the Saints move on from Cam Akers. That confirms our suspicion that Kendre Miller was going to be, or it furthers the confirmation, let me say it that way, that Kendre Miller is probably going to be the second running back behind Alvin Kamara, unless the Saints go out there and find somebody else, which we'll discuss a possibility around that later. What's going to be most interesting is to see what happens with Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, you have the opportunity to be able to send him to free agency as a release, have a bit of a handshake deal beforehand, get him to your practice squad, maximize your roster number that way, and then do your shuffling, especially on your offensive line, because you're going to need to figure out something there, and then you could potentially bring him back to the week 1 roster. Remember, the initial 53 is going to be very different than the second day 53, which is going to be wildly different than the week 1 53. So these things will not stay the same. Sometimes you cut guys knowing that you can get them to the practice squad without much hassle, without subjecting the waivers, all those other things, and then you look for an opportunity to get them back. 2 surprise names that I'm watching include Clyde Edwards-Helaire, but the other name, of course, that we're all watching for is Isaiah Foskey, the third-year defensive end, second-round pick from a few years ago, who never really seemed to get his confidence, get things going in this Brandon Staley scheme the way that we thought that he would as a stand-up rusher, getting back to what it is that made him Notre Dame's all-time sack leader during his time in college, but not a lot going for him so far throughout the preseason. Now, you're going to be hard-pressed to get anybody on, the Saints coaches have to say anything negative about the guy, but very interested to see actions over words, to see if the New Orleans Saints continue to give him some runway, or if they value some of these other edge rushers like Fadil Diggs, the 7th-round rookie, and of course Chris Rumph, who they added along with their 3 big starters in Chase Young, Carl Granderson, and Cam Jordan, if Isaiah Foskey makes his way back. So certainly a name we'll be watching for today, if that news hasn't already broken by the time that you're taking in this show. All right, coming up next, the New Orleans Saints quarterback deliberation, quote, continues. We'll see, though, just exactly how true that is. I think the Saints might have already made up their mind. We got the quarter for you next as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, and today is the day, August 26th. Officially, it is now FanDuel Futures Day, a brand new holiday for you football fans out there who love to live for your bold predictions and your preseason hunches for just 24 hours, already ongoing. FanDuel is giving you the deals that you need for NFL season predictions, whether you're calling your MVP early, maybe you're checking out some long shot division winners, or you're pulling together a bunch of division winners on a great 8-leg parlay where you can get some favorites mixed in there to help you out for an even bigger winning. And of course, you might be ready to crown your Super Bowl champion right now. The Kansas City Chiefs plus 800. The Baltimore Ravens are the favorite, around plus 600, plus 650. You can also check out MVP odds like Jaden Daniels plus 1,000 as well. So visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your futures bets now, because FanDuel Futures Day is one day and one day only. FanDuel, play your game. All right. right, family. According to head coach Kellen Moore, the New Orleans Saints still have not chosen a quarterback, but I think we're all pretty sure that Kellen Moore knows who he wants to be the quarterback, and that's kind of all that matters when it comes to the quarterback decision. We appreciate you very much, as always, for being here with us. Don't forget to like, subscribe, all that kind of stuff, so you can make sure you continue to support the show. I've loved all the support here so far. One other thing that I'd like to ask for you to do real quick, Locked On Listener Survey. We do this every year. You can head over to lockedonpodcast.com/survey to participate. Tell us what you like, what you don't like, how to make our shows better, advertising, all that kind of stuff. You can find that, a link in the description, or just head over to lockedonpodcast.com/survey to make sure your voice is heard. All right, so the New Orleans Saints had a press conference on Monday with head coach Kellen Moore, and we asked about the quarterback conversation, where things were going, who was going to be the starting quarterback, if they were ready to name that. And it sounds like they're still not ready to name that starting quarterback. And when you listen to Kellen Moore, he'll genuinely say that they have not come up with a decision yet. And I will say a lot of good things about Kellen Moore, but one of the things that I will say is that so far he hasn't really lied. And I don't think that he is lying. I think there might still be deliberation that's happening, but I think Kellen Moore knows who he wants. I don't think Kellen Moore is in a situation here to where he's still looking at film, racking his brain, going, man, which one of these guys do I really want to be my starting quarterback week one? I think he knows who he wants. And maybe there's some dissenting voices. That's always healthy to have in terms of those conversations and things like that. I think Kellen Moore actually said that the other day. There's healthy conversations around the quarterback position, which means that there's maybe some disagreement there, but that's okay. Ultimately, it all comes down to Kellen Moore playing and starting who he wants to be his quarterback to start the season. And I don't know which quarterback that is. I think of Tyler Shough as Kellen Moore's guy, but that doesn't necessarily mean that Kellen Moore looks at Tyler Shough as a ready product just yet. We can't guarantee that, and we don't know, right? But I think Kellen Moore knows who it is that he wants. The thing is that they're not hitting a practice field until Wednesday. Media is not going to see them practice until Wednesday or Thursday, so we won't even know a rotation until one of those 2 days. And so why say anything yet? I don't know that it's a massive competitive advantage to hold back for as long as you can on which quarterback is going to be the starting quarterback. I don't think they're going to carry this into next week during the week one practices. I think we'll know at some point this week, and it'll either get out of the building or Kellen Moore will say it or the Saints will announce it, however it's going to go. But I don't think they're going to try to push it that long. I think as you're getting onto the field on Wednesday and Thursday, as Kellen Moore mentioned, you're kind of trying to turn 80% of your focus ahead to the Arizona Cardinals, but there are also some things that they still look to kind of fine-tune, install, all these other pieces that they didn't really worry about for the preseason, but now we'll get ready for the regular season during this time, that are probably built off of or scaffolded off of some of the fundamental things or foundational things that they did do during the preseason. So it's not like it's a huge learning curve thing or anything like that, but it's part of what you're doing, right? Once you have that quarterback picked, you start to install stuff that quarterback likes. You start to install stuff that you know works for that quarterback. And these are two quarterbacks that win in different ways and struggle in different ways. And so you're you're tailor-making the offense to whichever one of those quarterbacks you select. We had our conversation about this a while back, where there was that report around the idea that, Tyler Shough, the Saints were already building their offense around Tyler Shough. Well, yeah, they're probably having those conversations, but they were probably having those conversations with Spencer Rattler as well. I wouldn't be surprised, considering how long they kept things going with the Jake Haener through line, that they probably had those conversations with Jake too. Like, it would be the respectful thing to do if you're truly considering him, or if you truly considered him at one point as being a part of your quarterback battle. And that was pretty early in this process when this kind of came out. And so I think now is the real conversation around, okay, you're the starting quarterback. What do you like? What do you feel like you're most comfortable doing? How do we build around it? And what more can we put in? Those are the types of conversations that you're having as a head coach. And oh, by the way, I like what you can do in the read option. Let's do that. I like what you can do in the RPO. Let's put more of this in. I like what you can do as a QB power guy if I wanted to install that. So let's get some of that in. Like, those types of things begin to happen later on this week. But until reporters like us are seeing a practice and we're seeing a quarterback rotation, there's nothing, there's no downside to waiting to make an announcement. There's no reason to say anything until we're going to see it. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if we didn't see a rotation on Wednesday, but then did on Thursday and learned about the starting quarterback based on something either before Thursday or Thursday's practice more than anything that happens on Wednesday. Like, I don't see anything wrong with Kellen Moore and the New Orleans Saints kind of pushing this. Like I said, I don't know that it gives you a massive competitive advantage, but hey, for as long as you can make the Arizona Cardinals think twice, guess twice, prepare twice, I think you do that. And so I don't think it's going to help you win week one, but hey, if it's some competitive advantage and the Saints feel like they're getting that competitive advantage, then go for it. You don't owe anybody any reason to go out there and say, this is my starting quarterback, right? There's nothing that you owe to anybody. So you can continue to push this as long as you want. But I do think that Kellen Moore knows who the quarterback is. And as I've said before in previous episodes, in case you missed it, when it comes to this quarterback battle, I really think that I've said that there's two factors, but really there's one factor, but I'll tell you everything. The two factors that I think are most important are whether or not the New Orleans Saints value at that quarterback position experience or potential most. Whichever one of those they value the most, that's going to tell you which quarterback they go to. Experience leads you to Spencer Rattler, 6 games of starting NFL experience, 7 games of NFL experience as a whole, or 6.5, however it is that you want to call it. And then also, you look at corner, you look at safety, you look at running back, you look at a couple of other positions. Like the Saints have leaned towards experience over potential, where they have other young players as well as some experienced NFL veterans. And so it could lead you to believe that. But then if you want to go with potential, which makes sense at the quarterback position, then maybe Tyler Shough is the place that you go. He has NFL size, he's got an NFL arm, he's got great ball placement, he runs well, he moves well, gives you a little bit of that athleticism that you really enjoyed with some other quarterbacks in your time if you're Kellen Moore. And so I could absolutely see the potential of Tyler Shough being enticing. But here's the real deal, right? We know that eventually this is going to be Tyler Shough's ship to steer. And so with that being the case, isn't the real question just, do the Saints feel that Tyler Shough is ready? Isn't that really the only question that matters? Is, does Kellen Moore think that Tyler Shough is ready? Because if Kellen Moore believes that Tyler Shough is ready, he can put him out there right now. If Tyler Shough doesn't think, if Kellen Moore doesn't think that Tyler Shough is ready, then he'll roll with Spencer Rattler until he thinks that Tyler Shough is ready to see his opportunity. That might be really the one and only actual question that matters outside of, who does Kellen Moore want to work with and when does he want to work with them? And so we'll see as things continue to go through. Wednesday or Thursday might be the announcement. Wednesday or Thursday is when we'll definitely probably know something if it hasn't come out before then. And so for right now, the deliberations continue. But I think, even though I don't know exactly who it is, I think Kellen Moore knows who he believes should be his starting quarterback. And eventually, that's all that's going to matter. Coming up next, the New Orleans Saints could get a little interesting if they're still interested in that running back position, going after a pretty enticing running back in Audric Estime. Let's get to that next as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This episode is presented by Yahoo Fantasy. This year, I'm going to be playing my fantasy football along with the rest of the Locked On executive team over at Yahoo Fantasy. And you should be too, whether you're a first-timer or you're a veteran that's starting your millionth league. With season kickoff for the NFL on September 4th, right around the corner. Now is the time to start playing Yahoo Fantasy Football, which offers you a lot of great and fun ways to compete. You want more ways to play? I highly recommend you check out the brand new Yahoo Fantasy Guillotine League mode, where the lowest scoring team each week gets eliminated until one team is left standing. Maybe you want to play with friends instantly. Try the new Draft with Friends mode. Prefer the classics? Well, you can still get your crew together and go head-to-head in a private league. No crew? No problem. Join a public league, the easiest way to play. The NFL season kicks off on September 4th, so don't wait. Start your league now and draft now at yahoofantasy.com/lockedonnfl. That's yahoofantasy.com/lockedonnfl. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. If the New Orleans Saints are still interested in potentially looking at adding some talent to their running back room, there's a great option now available thanks to the Denver Broncos in second-year running back Audric Estime, the 5'11", 227-pound bowling ball of a rusher. And when I say bowling ball, I mean because during his time at Notre Dame, this guy was a fantastic pass protector, and he was an outstanding rusher between the tackles, picking up yards after contact, all of that. He brought a little bit of that with him to the league. I think he's still looking to see exactly what's going to translate for him in this in the pros, or at this level of competition. But if you wanted to roll the dice on somebody that could potentially be available for you, he's definitely one of those guys that makes a good bit of sense. Now, as I mentioned earlier, there are not a lot of players that are claimed through waivers when it comes to roster cut time. It happens, but it doesn't happen at the percentage and at the frequency that people think that it does. So New Orleans, the only reason why I'm even bringing them up in this conversation is because of the rumor before that they were potentially interested and calling around with teams to see if they could shop for a potential running back to add to their roster. And so with that in consideration, if the Saints are indeed looking for another running back, Audric Estime becomes a really, really interesting piece, again, from that familiar Denver Broncos, team over there, but without having to give up a draft pick or anything like that to get it done. So a couple of things to keep in mind. Why would Audric Estime be a good selection? So one of the reasons why I highlight him is because he's a guy that's not averse to working in a committee, and it's not foreign for him to work in a committee. Did the same thing at Notre Dame, effectively did the same thing last year in Denver. During his year in Denver last year, he ran just 76 times, but gained 310 rushing yards in the process. So average 4.1 rushing yards. But the thing that stands out to me the most is that 234 of his rushing yards came after contact. After contact. To me, that is absolutely critical. I have not seen a lot from this New Orleans Saints offensive line that makes me feel like they're going to start paving the way for anybody in the running game and creating yards for running backs. We also haven't seen all of the Saints rushing approach so far, I believe. And so with that being the case, maybe that changes. But even still, having a guy that can create his own yardage out of the backfield is a major, major need for New Orleans. 3.08 yards after contact per attempt last year. Not a ton, but look at that and compare that to the numbers for the New Orleans Saints backfield last year. Jamal Williams, 2.5. So he comes in over a half a yard better than Jamal Williams. Alvin Kamara, 2.76. So over a quarter of a yard better than Alvin Kamara per carry, right, on average in that category. And then Kendre Miller, 3.23. Now, Kendre Miller carried the ball only 39 times last year and picked up 3.23 yards after contact. It's one of the reasons why I believe Kendre Miller is best suited to be the complementary player to Alvin Kamara in the backfield in Kellen Moore's rushing system, which is going to ask you to run between the tackles, is going to ask you to be the sort of barreling, again, bowling ball type, right? You got to go up there and pick up some tough yards when you're playing in that inside the tackles, inside zone rushing attack. And Kendre Miller is somebody that has been proven to be able to do exactly that. Now, I will highlight Clyde Edwards-Helaire as well, a guy that had 3.62 yards after contact last season, but bear in mind that he only ran the football 13 times. So we're looking at a small sample size there. We have a similar or a larger sample size from Audric Estime, who ran the football 76 times last season and forced 13 missed tackles along the way. So he was out there breaking tackles, picking up extra yards, getting all those yards after contact. I think that is a big thing that the New Orleans Saints can certainly use in this offense. Now, here's the trick. If the New Orleans Saints want to get Audric Estime, the best way for them to go about it, or any player that you like that got waived and is subject to waivers, this is going to apply to. So this is important. The Saints are 9th in waiver priority. 9th. And that is because, and it will be the same for the first 3 weeks of the season, they will be a top 10 waiver priority team. What does that mean? If they put in a waiver claim for a player, just like fantasy football in a way, if you put in a waiver claim for a player and a team that ranks higher than you, or rather lower than you, right, 1 through 8, also puts a waiver claim in, the lowest team, or effectively the worst team from last year, gets that player. So the Saints are at number 9, the Browns are at number 2, and the Philadelphia Eagles are at number 32. And so if the Eagles and the Saints put in a waiver claim, the Saints, being the highest in the priority order out of those two at 9 as opposed to 32, would be awarded that player. But if the Browns were to put in a waiver claim as well on that same player, the Browns would be awarded because they're at 2 and the Saints are at 9. So the lower the number, the higher priority you have 1 through 32. if you go back and look at the Diana Rossini report from The Athletic, where she mentioned that the Saints, the Browns, and I believe it was the Vikings were the three teams that were calling around and talking to, coaches, or not coaches, but talking to teams about potential running back pursuits and all that. The Browns are the team that would have the highest waiver priority out of those three. They also have the only unsigned draft pick left in Quinshon Judkins, who is dealing with legal stuff. And so we'll see where things go there. Surprise, surprise, the Cleveland Browns are held up by legal stuff. Who'd have thunk? And so I think that there is a chance that if the Saints wanted to go and get him, now you have the Titans at number 1, you got the Giants at number 3, you got all these other teams that are going to also be in the mix. I guess I was going to say the Raiders, but they just got Ashton Genty, so I doubt that they're too worried about their running back room at the moment. But the Saints could be a pretty high priority if they were to end up putting a waiver claim in there. You pick up an Audric Estime, you get 3 years with him. He's got 2025, 2026, 2027 still on his rookie deal. Kind of the exact same thing that happened with Devon Vele, but without giving up any assets along the way. And then you don't reset the roster order until after week 3. So you're good where you are. So the Saints could go there if they wanted to go there. It's not about it's not reflective of what the running back room looks like right now. It's reflective of what the running back room could look like with additional investment. And I think that that's the way that the Saints are kind of thinking about this if they are indeed interested. All right, make sure you come back tomorrow. Remember, we're daily here, and we'll get you everything you need to know about the New Orleans Saints 53-man roster. We got that coming up for you tomorrow. We appreciate you very much. As always, making this a party day, part of your routine for saying yes to me on the show. If you see me, please say hi. If you need anything else or on your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on your favorite social media at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing, how you living. Let me know how you momming them. I trust you, that nation. I'll holla at you.